The 1981/82 season had some of the craziest storylines involving the league's most iconic players. It was a season like no other. There are so many teams and players that had some great moments, but we'll be focusing on 4. Magic Johnson, who went from being booed by his fans to winning a title. Larry Bird getting benched in the middle of the season. Dr. J's incredibly underrated year, and Moses Malone's legendary MVP season. Make sure to comment on your favorite memory from this year. As beloved of a figure as Magic Johnson is in Los Angeles, there was a time when he was met with boos from the Lakers fans. That occurred in the game after the Lakers head coach, Paul Westhead, was fired after Magic Johnson publicly stated that he wanted to be traded. His exact words were this, according to the New York Times, quote, "I can't play here anymore. I want to leave. I want to be traded." End of quote. All this occurred after a game against the Utah Jazz early in the season. According to Paul Westhead, Johnson ignored his defensive instructions during a timeout. Westhead reprimanded him both during the game and privately afterward. That must have been his breaking point because that's when he publicly asked to be traded. He has stated since then that he was happy with the way the offense was running and he wanted to play at a faster pace. But that was only the beginning of all the negative criticism that he was getting. Sports writers were ripping him to shreds for the way he was putting himself above the coaches and team management. They didn't like how he was using his power to get his coach fired. The fans around the league were also sharing the same sentiment. When the starting teams for the All-Star game were announced, Magic was not voted to be one of the starting guards for the Western Conference. In fact, he finished a distant 5th place among guards. How was he going to respond to all of that? With distasteful taunts? Or would he draw into a shell, like another modern player that has been foolishly compared to Magic Johnson? I'm not saying any names. The answer is none of the above. Instead, he simply played his game and went on to have a career year. He finished with a career high in rebounds, steals, and defensive win shares. This was also Magic's greatest all-around season, as he never got this close to averaging a triple-double. He finished with a total of 18 triple-doubles. To put that in perspective, that is also the most LeBron James has ever produced in one season. Then there's this next interesting stat. He finished the season with 751 rebounds and 743 assists. He is currently one of 5 players to record over 700 assists and rebounds in one season. As his numbers show, there's little he could not do on the court. That's why the Lakers were able to be so successful while employing 2 point guards in the starting lineup. Although there was nobody in the league that was a better facilitator than Magic, he proved that he could be successful while playing all positions. We all think of Magic as the greatest point guard ever, but he was more positionless in the first few years while sharing the court with Norm Nixon. He was able to make it work even though he wasn't playing his natural position. In fact, he was officially the team's shooting guard. So by the end of the season, the Lakers won 57 games and Magic was selected to the All-NBA second team. He was beaten out by Gus Williams for the first team. No disrespect to the Wizard, who was a fine player, but it was clear that the perception was that the Lakers were quote-unquote struggling because of Magic. So how is he going to respond to all of that in the upcoming postseason? He helped the Lakers become the first team to ever sweep their way to the finals. In their first series against the Phoenix Suns, Magic averaged the impressive stat line of 20 points on 57% shooting, 11.8 rebounds, 10.8 assists, and 2.8 steals per game. He was the reason behind their dominant run. For example, the head coach of the Spurs, Stan Albeck, said this about the Lakers' fast break offense after the conference finals defeat to Sports Illustrated. Quote, "I don't know if any of the great Boston teams back in the 60s and 70s ever advanced the ball this quickly. We tried everything, keeping 2 men back, going to the offensive boards, slowing it down, everything the book says you're supposed to do, and still, we couldn't stop them." End of quote. It was something that needs to be seen to believe. No team has ever pushed the ball with greater speed and skill than what the Lakers did during that playoff run. To give an idea of how dangerous they were on offense, the Lakers went on a 40-9 run in just 11 minutes of play against the Sixers in Game 1 of the Finals. Then in Game 4, the Lakers made 52 consecutive points without a jump shot. They were just relentless on the open floor. They wanted to run the ball down your throat every single time on offense. After a while, teams would just run out of gas trying to defend them. That was all Magic's doing. So after they finished off the Sixers in 6 games, Magic won his second consecutive Finals MVP award. He averaged for the series 16.2 points on 53% shooting, 10.8 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. He led the team in all of those categories except for points. Jamal Wilkes was the leading scorer for the Lakers, and he averaged 19.7 points. And that is how you respond to all the negativity surrounding you. You just let your game do the talking, and everyone will quickly realize how stupid they were for doubting you. Imagine telling the superstar of your team that's in the middle of his prime that he needs to come off the bench. Yeah, that never goes well. In most cases, those are conversations that coaches have with aging superstars that haven't come to the realization that they're not the same player anymore. It's extremely rare that a team feels the need to bench their best player, but it has happened to one of the legends of the game. Larry Bird was asked during the 1981-82 season to come off the bench for an extended period of time after leading his team to the title the previous year and finishing second in MVP voting. What was the reasoning behind this curious move? Let's start from the beginning. It all started when Bird got elbowed in the face and suffered a fractured cheekbone in a matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks. Larry had to leave the game and would be out for the next 5 games. To make matters worse, Tiny Archibald was also out with a shoulder injury, and he missed a total of 11 games that coincided with Bird's injury. Having to play without 2 of your best players is usually a recipe for disaster. However, the Celtics did not lose a single game from that 5-game span. When Bird returned, head coach Bill Fitch decided not to alter the starting lineup. They were in the middle of an 8-game winning streak, and he wanted to avoid messing up the team's momentum. So for the rest of the season, Larry Bird was asked to come off the bench. How was he going to respond to that? Was he going to pout? Was he going to throw his coach under the bus? Was he going to fake an injury because he's not used to coming off the bench? He didn't do any of that. He was ready to do whatever his coach asked of him. This is what he said after the end of the regular season, according to the New York Times. Quote, "It's the same thing for me as starting, except I come into the game a little later. I like to think I give people their money's worth when they come to a game. Even if I don't start, that doesn't mean I shouldn't play as hard as if I did. Then I'd be cheating the fans and my teammates and myself." End of quote. There was no difference in his play. During that 22-game stretch, he averaged a combined 21.3 points per game on 51.5% shooting, 10.3 rebounds per game, and 5 assists per game in 33 minutes per game. Prior to the injury, he was averaging 23.5 points per game on 49.9% shooting, 11.1 rebounds per game, and 6.1 assists per game in 39 minutes per game. He had the power to make this a much bigger deal, but that's not who Larry Legend is. He took the opportunity to become the greatest 6-man the league has ever seen, and the Celtics ended up winning 18 games in a row. That is tied for the 7th longest winning streak in history. During that streak, Boston outscored its opponents by an average of 11.6 points per game. There aren't many teams in history that could have pulled off such a dominating stretch of games under those circumstances. Teams nowadays are too dependent on their star player, which a lot of times results in teams standing around, waiting for their star teammate to go one-on-one. That reflects on their insanely high usage rate. According to basketballreference.com, 43 of the top 50 players with the highest usage rate for a single season came from players from the year 2000 and onward. 14 of those seasons had come from the past 6 years. It explains why we're seeing so many incredible numbers, but that usually doesn't equivalent to much playoff success. The teams that share the ball and their responsibilities usually are the most successful. Just look at what we've seen from the Spurs and Warriors in the last decade. To give an idea of how evenly the Celtics players contributed to the offense, Larry Bird had a usage rate of 25.2% that season. That would have been the 44th highest usage rate for the 2020/21 season, and it would have been just below the usage rate of Lou Williams, who was coming off the bench for that whole season. How crazy is that? But what do you know? The Celtics didn't need Larry Bird to have the ball at all times for them to be successful. In fact, it was Robert Parrish who had the highest usage rate for that team. So instead of revolving everything around Larry Bird, each player fulfilled their role that contributed to the betterment of the team. But that's also part of Larry Bird's greatness. He doesn't need the ball at all times to be effective. He was a player that had a unique understanding of how to control every aspect of the game and how to uplift his teammates' level of play. The Celtics weren't going to beat you with one player, but as a collective group. When you have Tiny Archibald, Parrish, Cedric Maxwell, and Kevin McHale, who was coming off the bench, there's no need to dominate the ball, and Bird understood that. That's why they were easily the best team in the league. But they fell short of making the finals. So why make such a big deal of this team? Well, the main reason they got defeated by the Philadelphia 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals was due to a dislocated left shoulder that Tiny Archibald suffered within the first minute of Game 3. So that meant that Gerald Henderson was going to run the point for the rest of the series. Henderson was indeed much better on defense, but he was a big drop-off as a playmaker. We should give credit to Maurice Cheeks, who had a lot to do with shutting down Henderson on the offensive end. He averaged 10.6 points per game on 41% shooting, compared to the 50% shooting that he had during the regular season. The Celtics couldn't adjust to the loss of Archibald until it was too late, when they were down 3-1 in the series. They were able to force a Game 7, but the Sixers weren't going to allow themselves to lose a 3-1 series lead to the Celtics 2 years in a row. I believe it's fair to ask if the better team won that series. If Tiny Archibald was healthy, do the Sixers still beat the Celtics and advance to the finals? It begs the question since the Celtics beat the Sixers 4 out of 6 times in the regular season. We also have to note that Tiny was an all-star that year, so the Celtics didn't just lose a key role player. He was one of the stars in the league, so the unfortunate timing of that injury was a big reason why the Celtics fell short in the playoffs. If it wasn't for that, maybe we would have seen Larry Bird and Magic Johnson play in the finals a lot sooner than we did. But enough about the hypotheticals. I believe this is one of the most underrated teams ever, and is Larry Bird's most underrated season. It takes a truly special player to embrace a role that seems to be a demotion, and to continue to thrive as the best player in the world. A lot of players say they'll do whatever it takes to win, just as long as it fits their narrative. Larry Bird was truly willing to do whatever it took to help his team. This once again proves that the numbers don't tell half the story of Bird's greatness. There is simply no one like him. The Philadelphia 76ers came into the season with broken spirits. They just came off one of the most entertaining and competitive 7-game series that you'll ever see. They played extremely well against their biggest rival, the Boston Celtics, but lost in the 7th game after being up 3-1. Losing in that fashion can be the start of a downfall for any team. Then there's the important detail that their starting center and the enforcer of the team, Daryl Dawkins, missed 28 games due to a broken leg that he suffered in the middle of the season. Despite having to go through those tough hurdles, the Sixers went 21-7 without Dawkins. They also went on a 10-game winning streak immediately after he was out of the lineup. In the end, they finished with the second best record in the league. This wasn't surprising because the Sixers had won more than any other team in the previous 5 years. They were the most consistently dominant team, and a lot of that had to do with Erving's unwillingness to go on cruise control during the season, and the rest of his teammates followed his example. The numbers back that up, as he finished with the highest win shares per 48 minutes in box plus minus in the league. He also finished second in value over replacement player rating, second in PER, second offensive box plus minus, third in win shares, and fifth in points per game. As far as where some of his numbers rank for his career, he posted the highest PER, box plus minus, offensive box plus minus, and he had the most efficient scoring season of his NBA career. This was basically a repeat of the MVP season that he had the prior year. You can make the case that what he helped the Sixers accomplish this season was even more impressive. This all helped him receive the proper credentials that a player with his talent level is supposed to have. He finished third in MVP voting and was selected for the All-NBA first team. For all the attention he gets for his individual greatness, we don't want to forget how great of a leader he was. With that being said, he was still arguably the best individual talent in the game. Even at 31 years old, he was still wowing us with some of his breathtaking moves. The numbers also indicate how immensely talented he was. He averaged 24.4 points on 55% shooting, 6.9 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 2 steals per game. He was somebody who could impact the game in every facet. He proved it all season long. But the best example of this came against the Kansas City Kings. He went for the stat line of 30 points on 80% shooting, 13 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 steals, and 4 blocks. It was a performance that demonstrated the complete game that he possessed. He worked hard on the glass. He had great instincts that allowed him to intercept a lot of passes. He was an underrated shot blocker thanks to his outstanding leaping abilities. His unselfish nature made him out to be a respected playmaker, and he was an efficient scorer even while converting on incredibly difficult shots at the rim. After tearing apart that team, Kansas City coach Con Fitzsimmons said this about the Doctor: "I think he's playing the best he's ever played. Doc plays hard every minute he's out there. I can't say he's the best because Larry Bird does the great things too, but when it comes to being sensational, he's in a class by himself." Thanks to his leadership and high level of play, the Sixers won 58 games. As they entered the playoffs, there was nothing on their mind but redemption. But their road became much tougher after what happened in the closing game of the short series against the Hawks. Lionel Hollins hurt his wrist after a fight with Tree Rollins. They were going to be without their best defensive guard, who was in and out of the lineup for the final 2 rounds. But they came together and got past a tough Milwaukee Bucks team in the semifinals in 6 games. They got the matchup they were looking for in the conference finals, the rematch against the Boston Celtics. But it started in the worst possible way. They lost game 1 by 40 points. It was an embarrassing defeat, one that demoralizes a team mentally. But Julius wouldn't let this happen to his squad. They bounced back and took a commanding 3-1 series lead. Surely, they wouldn't make the same mistake as the previous year. But the Celtics forced a Game 7. It was deja vu for Sixers fans. The Celtics had all the momentum, and they were at home. Everyone was counting them out. But Dr. J and Andrew Toney were ready to play. The Boston Strangler had 34 points on 61% shooting, along with 6 assists. Julius did everything else. He had 29 points on 48% shooting, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. They were ultra clutch, and they defeated Boston by 14 points. This was an incredible achievement for this team. But in the finals, they faced a Lakers team who was starting to hit their stride. They were extremely explosive on offense. Julius tried to do his part to keep up with them. He averaged 25 points on 54% shooting, along with 8.2 rebounds per game for the series. But it wasn't enough. This team needed something else to get them over the hump. After years of mediocrity, the Houston Rockets shocked the world by reaching the finals. Now, there were real expectations. They proved how serious they were by adding Elvin Hayes. He would bring that championship experience and even more size to the front line. We've already discussed how phenomenal Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Dr. J were. But there was one player who was even better individually. Yes, it was Moses Malone in the 1981-82 season. You may not have heard of what he accomplished that year, but this was one of the most legendary seasons that we ever seen from a big man. Let's take a look at the numbers. He averaged 31.1 points per game on 52% shooting and 14.7 rebounds per game. Now here are the advanced numbers that he produced. He recorded the highest win shares, PER, and offensive box plus minus in the league. As far as the team's success, He led the Houston Rockets to 46 wins for the season. The end result was that he was the MVP, thanks to the monster numbers that he had. It's something that hasn't been duplicated since. There hasn't been a single player that's averaged over 30 points and 14 rebounds for a season. This was Moses at his apex. The numbers suggest that this was the greatest season of his career. He produced the highest points per game average, win shares, offensive win shares, value over replacement player rating, box plus minus, and offensive box plus minus. He's mostly famous for his rebounding abilities, and he's widely considered the greatest offensive rebound ever. But he was more than capable of recording impressive scoring numbers. He demonstrated this various times that year. For example, he scored his career high of 53 points on 63% shooting, along with 22 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block in the victory against the San Diego Clippers. Then there were 11 other games where he scored at least 40 points. There's one other historic performance that Moses had. It came against the Seattle Supersonics when he had the stat line of 38 points on 49% shooting, 32 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 assists. That is only the 7th time since the merger that a player has recorded over 30 points and 30 rebounds. What's even more impressive about that game is that he pulled down a total of 21 offensive rebounds. That is the most that has ever been recorded in the history of the league. In fact, no one has ever pulled down over 20 offensive rebounds in a game. What was his motivation behind this legendary performance? Well, there were some reports that he was padding his stats against the weaker opponents. That made him angry, so he decided to prove a point against the Sonics All-Star center, Jack Sigma. He proved that he could dominate against any opponent. The moral of the story is that you don't ever make Moses Malone mad. I mean, look at this dude square up Jack Sigma years later. I think it's safe to say that there were some problems between the two players. But that game against the Sonics wasn't the only time he let out some steam against his opponents. It was reported by the New York Times that according to some Rockets players, he was also upset about something that occurred in the All-Star game. After a productive first 3 quarters where he had 12 points and 11 rebounds, he was benched by coach Pat Riley with 8.5 minutes left in the game. According to Rockets guard Robert Reed, that made the big fella mad. Keep in mind that the 1982 All-Star game occurred on January 31st. So for the month of February, he averaged the insane stat line of 38.1 points per game on 56% shooting and 17.3 rebounds per game. In the immediate 3 games after the All-Star break, he had the 50-point performance that we already discussed. Then he went for 45 points and 20 rebounds against the Phoenix Suns. And then he torched the Kansas City Kings with 47 points and 14 rebounds. That's the type of intensity that you want from your MVP. This was already a player that played a hard-nosed style in every possession. He would dig and scratch for every rebound. For example, this is what Washington Bullets player Mitch Kupchak said about what it was like playing against him, according to the Washington Post. Quote, "When you play against Moses, you have to be looking for him every second. He is probably the hardest guy for me to play. He'll go after everything, which means you never relax." End of quote. That's how this dude played on a random Tuesday. Now imagine how he's playing when he's pissed off. His singular focus and intensity are the only reasons why the Rockets were tied for the 4th best record in the West. I would say that it's probably not a good thing that your second scoring option is a 36-year-old Elvin Hayes. It's also not a great sign when everyone except for 3 players has a positive box plus minus for this season. With the exception of Moses, point guard Allen Level had a 2.1 box plus minus and Robert Reed had a 0.1 box plus minus. There was nothing special about this team, except for the fact that they had the best player in the world. He proved in the 1981 playoffs that he could carry a team to the finals, and he carried this team all season long. The ultimate stat that proves how valuable he was for the Rockets came when they traded him away in the offseason to the Sixers. With him gone, they only won 14 games in the 1982-83 season. This team was total garbage without him. So I believe he deserves all the roses for how he made this team look so competent. It's what MVPs do, and he was so deserving of it. For over 40 years, this has been the highest points per game average by any center since the merger. Unfortunately, the Houston Rockets didn't have another Cinderella run in them. They were bounced from the first round by the Sonics. They were simply a much deeper team. Moses couldn't do it on his own. He needed more help. The Rockets were unable to provide that, and they sent him away later that offseason. He wasted no time in making history with Dr. J and the Sixers. But he certainly made his mark with that franchise, and he's still considered one of their best players ever. But what about you all? What do you remember the most from this season? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.